It's just so boring to see people win. Like, cool, cool. That's so awesome. I want to see people fail. Failure is like the best part of the story. It's the story. It's amazing. I like, you get excited. I get excited at the idea of just trying so hard, putting effort and time and your body and maybe money and resources, putting your resources all into something and it doesn't work. That's amazing. You like get cracked open. Your body is just bursting. Your ego is bursting. And anything can happen. And if you do take that idea literally, your ego and your body bursting open, you have all of these pieces to uniquely and creatively piece together a new attempt. That's incredible. Like, failure is a creative exercise. That's all it is. Okay, so some beginning notes. My window wide open. The breeze feels really nice. The air isn't super cold, but you probably will hear my neighbors. It's worth it for me. I have 2 kitty cats. They love to be a part of everything I make. They will probably make an appearance. I also have notes, and if I feel like I'm going off track, heading, on a tangent, I will probably start reading from my notes. The subject that I really am aiming to focus on is failure. Failure is one of my favorite topics of all time. It sucks. It's so boring to watch someone succeed. Failure is a story, and failure is almost always a really compelling story. It's so much better. It's my boyfriend and I, we tried watching the Ray Charles biopic, and biopics are like a great example because who wants to see like a famous person be famous? Like, there's like drugs and women, and it's just like really lame. Like, you want to see people fail. I want to see people fail. That's the heart of doing anything. And so it's a topic that I talk a lot about, that is in like a huge bulk of my work, is failure. And I think it's like a great time for me to start talking about it just because of personal circumstance. It's been percolating for me. I recently moved, and then I was sick of not having a job. Or that's not true. I never want a job. I was getting agitated by the idea that I was running out of money and wanted to see more consistent money coming in. So I took the first job that I was offered, and it's not working for me. I mean, you don't need like the litany of reasons why, but my body hurts all the time. I've been fighting a headache for like over a week. Like, that it just is not compatible. It is not it was not a decision made from like a really solid place. I took it out of fear. And so that the fear aspect and what I consider that to be a failure is like a great like jumping off point in considering like trying something new, failing, and how special it is to fail. So a lot of like my ideas of failure are rooted in my experiences, which include having been shamed or embarrassed or humiliated to get me to behave in a certain way. So this is like childhood, socially, list any institution. That was like a punishment, used as a punishment to see certain behaviors out of me, or to just, it was a punishment. And I learned a lot of those things. I internalized them, and I would use self-punishment on myself a lot as I got older. So that is the angle or the perspective that I approach failure from. For me, I became so like solid, so used to, so comfortable with being embarrassed that making an effort to try something new, knowing that it would probably lead to embarrassment, was no issue for me. I feel really steeled to being embarrassed. That's not the case for everybody. And you probably know people who take themselves very, 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 very seriously, who are not able to take jokes, laugh at jokes, they can't unclench. And that also stems from having been made to feel embarrassed or being shamed. And they really need to seek like justice for that experience. And that's something that can happen also in response to being embarrassed or made to feel shame. That was not the case for me. I really steeled like my way through. Like I'm really, really solid, where trying something new was, yeah, I was gonna mess up, I was gonna make a mistake, and it's not that big a deal. It's not a huge deal. You don't need to like emotionally recuperate for a very long time, because it's like a regular thing. I am in big favor of making a horrible mess of something and then learning backwards. When you do something, anything new, anything, and you do it successfully on the first try, I think that is worse. I do, like for character, for like anything, I think it's worse because you don't know why you succeeded. When you need like a good amount of failures right out of the gate, because you need to know your parameter. You need to know like what you're working with. When you fail enough, you know what you can take from and course correct or make changes. When you do something well, it's like free falling. Everything should be built from like a foundation of failure. I really do think that. And I think this is applicable to everything, from maybe like bad habits and behaviors to wanting to try new things, wanting to get out of a situation that you're not happy with. As just like a really loosey-goosey example, I have a hard time with eye contact. It's a hard thing for me. But I feel really, really comfortable working on it. I don't feel like it's something that needs to follow me my whole life. And the reason why I feel comfortable working on it is because it's going to get really weird for a while. I'll probably make the wrong amount of eye contact. And it's like, it's fine. It's fine. It's going to get weird. Maybe a little embarrassing, maybe a little like awkward. It'll lead to something, but like I'll work on it and I'll solve it, and it'll just be something that I had at some point. I struggled with making eye contact, and now I'm normal. Right? And I think that it's just like a mental hiccup. And a lot of things are like that. You just need to get out of your own way, basically. And I think everything is kind of like that. Everything you are ever going to do or ever going to want to do requires some effort from you. And for me personally, that's extremely liberating. That it's just me, the effort I put in, the work I'm willing to do, the hoops that I self-generate and then jump through. That's really liberating for me. And I don't think I would have come to that conclusion if I hadn't suffered so much pain around my personhood. And I don't ever want to get into a place where I'm sharing like very specific, intimate details of things. Whatever I do share is always super intentional. But I guess like a way that I could maybe explain this is when I like think of my name, like I say my name, There's not like an image that comes to mind. There's no like picture in my head. I don't like identify or conjure up like any visual of what my name means. And a lot of like story arcs and personal fulfillment are like attached to identity and personhood, and a lot of times that traces back to your family. Like an example of like if you ever hear somebody talking like a bunch of shit on their family, and it's like all day long, it's always a something, and you're like, yeah, it sounds like you should not be in that situation. And then they literally never do anything about it. It's like, then you can deduce that that complicated, painful, angry, whatever it might be, that is their form of relationship, and that relationship means more to them than the cycles that they're in. Like that bond means so much that they'll take it in any form, even if it's really painful. And it's like an effort to cling to like an identity, to not want to be forgotten, even if it's a really challenging and painful identity to keep. It makes me think of in Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, when the hurricane is coming and everybody knows it, the animals know it, everybody is getting out of the way, but people decide that they're going to stay because they want to live and die by their house. It kind of gives me that idea that even if it is not self-preservation, it is like an identity. I don't personally feel this way about really anything. I've often felt like really super like debased and unstable in my personhood, but rather than clamping like really tightly down on an identity because I'm too afraid to be without one, I just let go. And in doing so, I feel like I really freed myself, because I was standing up without anything under me, and it's super scary and it's super terrifying. And if you can just like freeze there when it feels like you're free falling, I think you probably will find that you have way more strength than you could have even really imagined. And by talking about this, I'm never ever glossing over how challenging it is, how extremely uncomfortable it is. I just think that if you can like endure, not even endure, successfully be unencumbered and free, knowing that you don't fully identify with or completely belong to anything, anywhere, it really, like, it sets you free, because none of it really matters anyway. All you have in the world is like your ability to make choices. Implicit, like, that's it, that's all there really is. Everything else is just true because it's believed. We put curses on ourselves, and I think a lot of the time that is based in fear, but I also think it's based in not being ready to change our lives. And what I mean by that is it can take so many shapes and forms, but when we decide that something isn't possible, or something will never happen, or something can't happen, it's basically like putting a curse on yourself. And every time you say it, you are keeping that curse alive. Because if you were to say maybe it is possible to be different, or for things to change, or for something new to happen, speaking really loosely, your life will change. And I don't think that people are always ready for that. And I can't even remember the quote. People only change when they have to, want to, whatever. I don't know. It's none of my business what the little catchy phrase is. I'm thinking very literally. I'm thinking about people that I know and my own actions. So it's super anecdotal. But that's where I have found like the source of all of my insight, all of my self-advice, the way I talk to others, is just paying really, really, really close attention to people around me and myself, being very self-knowing. I felt when I was younger, when I was like in my early 20s, I had a bunch of jobs all at once. I was also in university full-time. So I never like giving the specifics of this because I feel like a lot of people have these stories and it's always like I had it the worst. I had it pretty bad. But I felt like I felt like I had no choice. I think that's the best way to say it for what I'm talking about. Sometimes my jobs would double schedule me, and then I would have both jobs mad at me, and I felt like I was like like untangling like management communications, my own time, my money being made, which I really really needed. And then there were things that would happen like all at once, like a pipe would burst in my house and while I was in class, and so I'm like trying to like do well in school, and then also like there were just so many things. And then I had a bunch of roommates for a bunch of years and trying to like have a clean home, things like that. When you live with 20-year-olds, it was just every single misstep or mistake or problem, whatever, I felt like I was personally victimized. I really felt like I was destined to just be stuck, like things just weren't working and I couldn't make it work and no one was listening, and all this like stuff. And it's like a curse on yourself to believe that this is all you're ever gonna get. And I think it would have been super super easy to just fall victim to that and stay that way for maybe forever. I mean, there are people I know who are much older than me who continue to feel victimized by their own life. And in no way am I ever saying this is how you fix your life. I don't know how to fix your life. I don't know how to fix my own life most of the time. It's really what I mean by bringing this up is that the choice is always to try, and trying and failure go hand in hand. You're going to fail a bunch, and you cannot, this is probably the only absolute I can really say, is you cannot use a couple failures as eternal evidence that things will never be different. That is when you give up, and when you give up, the curse is forever. Which, I mean, how hopeless feeling. It's also super egotistical, like coming from my perspective of embarrassment, shame, humiliation. I really need like an umbrella term for all of that, but that, like, coming from that perspective, when you are made to feel those ways, you start to get very narcissistic and egotistical because you think that your actions really really matter. And it's not anyone's fault that at the time we didn't have the strength to realize that the person who was making us feel those ways isn't the spokesperson for the universe. But it is imperative. Okay, so I guess there's a couple absolutes. It is freeing to realize that your actions don't matter that much. They really don't. And it's super freeing. And if anybody is in your life who is seeking out your mistakes, is seeking out your wrongdoing, that person is simply weak. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with your ego, your actions, your previous mistakes, your future. That person is simply weak, and all they want is to see someone squirm. That's all it is. And a really good way to deal with someone like that is to simply have like a full stoic solid ability to just be like, yeah, that is something I did. And you don't have to read into it, you don't have to defend it, you don't have to be like, what a fucking idiot I am. You can just accept it, because that acceptance is not possible for them, at least not yet. They are still very weak and hurt and acting out their hurt. It's also a curse for them, which is why in my experience, I have had people like that in my life who are just waiting for me to make mistakes to be like, see, it happens. Sometimes you run into people who are just not where you are, which is, if you're watching this, you're maybe considering it, you're thinking about trying, you're interested in something new. So I guess going to trying, what that means. Anything new is scary. I usually come from a perspective of art making and trying new mediums, trying new forms, finding new avenues to share the things that I make with people who might be interested in them. And let me preface by art is embarrassing. It is. Art is embarrassing. It's silly. It is silly that I complain all day long about making money because all I want to do is sit in my room and make weird little things. That's funny. Anything that you make is funny. It's embarrassing. I mean, I can say it's necessary. Of course I think it is. I think it's vital. It's the only thing I want to do. But I have the humility to not be so self-serious and admit that it's a little silly. It's funny. So when I'm thinking about trying, I'm thinking about things where you can just like deal with the embarrassment. Like, that did not work. I did not do that successfully. I failed a lot. And you don't take those failures. Well, take those failures to heart, actually. I changed my mind. You should take them to heart, because your heart is like a free, warm place where you can dissect everything and just take parts that were good. Like, this is where I continue to make the same mistakes, so this is something that needs to change. Here's something that I've been consistently effective in doing, and here's where I did stuff that I'd never done before but I liked and want to keep doing. But it's applicable to anything, just like with my eye contact thing. If like personal behaviors can also work the same way. Like, that was super weird. It's okay. We're gonna try again. It's just, life is just not that big of a deal. It's not. It's not that big of a deal. The idea that you should be afraid and you should be putting curses on yourself and putting curses on other people is insane. This just came to mind. It's a very hyper-specific anecdote, but I do think it'll illustrate a little bit of what I'm talking about. My previous job, before I moved to the city, I worked in a public library. I loved that job. I have very few bad things to say about that job. I loved it. I loved it. The people I worked with were unique. And leave it at that. Maybe some other time I'll share some strange and bizarre anecdotes. But I was caught by a coworker. So sometimes at a public library in the post-COVID era, it was very quiet. It was very slow. Sometimes most of my day was spent on the computer. I don't really like to do that. It gets very boring. And then when I get bored, I get very self-destructive. But it was a very slow. So I just started working on some personal projects, which I would do a lot. I would use the printer, you know, have access to all kinds of like databases and things like that. And one of my coworkers caught me. And so I did what I always do, is I just say, yeah, I was working on a personal project. No embarrassment, no remorse, just an acknowledgement of what's going on. And then you handle it from there. So I was like, yeah, I was working on a project. And she said to me that she wishes she could do that, but that she was warned on more than one occasion by the big boss and then her and I's boss that working on projects on company time is bad, because if you make profits off of your projects, the library could potentially feel entitled to part of those profits, if not all of them. Which, that sounds really complicated to me. I'm sure someone could legally explain to me how that works. I think in practicality, it's like fear-mongering. And her even saying that to me, she said that she tries to use, like if she ever does work on something, she'll try to use like different paper or different thread so it doesn't look like something she made while she was working at the library, which is so much mental gymnastics. But that, I think that idea like encompasses a lot of what I'm trying to get at, like how fear controls us, how it makes us put curses on ourselves, and how it is like it does work because she felt afraid. It effectively stomps out the ability to try. Now, do I recommend working on personal projects on company time? 100%. I think you should do that. I am an advocate for it. I will protect you if you're doing it. But, you know, that's not always possible. I recognize that that is not always possible. If you have the setup to be able to do that, I think that's fantastic. Not everybody does. And it was passed on to me by a coworker, which I think is supposed to kind of be like the telephone version of like fear mongering. You know, the big boss says it, it trickles down, it trickles down, it trickles down. They're like, whoa, I better be careful. I don't want to get caught. Life doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't. It doesn't matter. Do it. Do it. If you can, you should do it. If that's something you are interested, you're like, I really want to work on this. I want to see what I can do, what I can get done. Do it. That's it. At no point is it ever going to be a do or die situation. And if you're thinking like, well, I can't lose my job, I cannot tell you it's not a big deal to lose your job. I can't tell you that. I understand implicitly that so much of our safety is tied up in keeping a job. I am proposing the idea that taking some risks, when and where you can, is liberating. It is freeing. It's also like restores you. You will mess up. You will probably get caught. You know, whatever. Something will throw a wrench in that plan, but it restores life into your body to know that you have something to work for, to fight for, to defend, to participate in, that your life is not entirely driven by fear, which keeps anyone from trying. It keeps tons of people from trying. They make excuses to say, well, I can't do it because of this. Have you tried? Have you tried more than a few times? Have you successfully gotten over the hurdle of failing, of looking like an idiot? Have you tried looking like an idiot? How did that feel? You just gotta, I don't even want to say you've got to become numb to it because it still hurts, but like, so what? Like, so what? That's kind of how I feel about everything, and that's something that I really need to be reminding myself of right now, because I took a job that is not a good fit for me because I was afraid. I took the first job that was offered to me because I didn't have that solid, steeled sense of safety in myself and my capabilities. Sometimes life is completely out of our control, but so it like is all the time. Like, you never have control on anything. It's just, it makes life better. It makes life better to just fucking make a mess. Make a huge mess. There is absolutely nothing that you can't eventually, with effort from yourself, and maybe a lot of effort, maybe sometimes it is a ton of effort, but you can navigate it. You can find a way through. You can also look at failure as like a creative exercise, because all failure is like, how uniquely or how creatively are you going to get yourself out of the mess. So again, speaking always is from art making, and hyper anecdotally, the things that I can share, that my perspective is always from that. But so being someone who makes art in their 20s, it's really hard. It's really hard because all of like the cool artists are in like their 30s and 40s. They've already done their like, the artists that I like, I can't speak to commercially successful artists. I don't know what they're up to, but the artists that I'm interested in, like their 40s, have done like the legwork of working in jobs outside of the art world, and were able to make a larger commitment to art later in life. I am like, still in my 20s, in my late 20s, but am like wanting that right now. And there are some outside pressures from people where it's like, okay, you've wasted enough time twiddling around, making your little thingies, writing your little. It's time to get serious about a career. And this is like, most people give up. Most people give up. That is a blanket statement that is essentially very, very true. You get burned one time, you get burned 2 times. You've gone through a couple years of, it doesn't even need to be art making, it could be virtually anything that you want to do. You go through a few years of it just not working, and then you think, well, this is never going to work for me. I guess I should start thinking about what's going to make me some money so I don't have to hustle so hard so much later in my life. That is a logical conclusion. I guess maybe I am advocating for being a little bit of like a psychopath, to just like keep going and keep going and keep going. But I really don't even think it's psychopathy. I think it's just fear-based. I think people are like, whoa, what if it never works out for me and I have nothing to show for all my effort and I've wasted all this time or money when I could have been career building so I can go on vacation twice a year. I don't know, bro. I have never in my entire life wanted to drive a fancy car or take like a cruise or where do people go? Cancun? I don't know. Like, I don't have the keeping up with the Joneses in me in any way. Even when it's sometimes forced upon me, I never ever want to just start talking shit about people in my life. But not even that long ago, someone in my family was like, who knows, maybe you'll get a full-time job and you'll just fall in love with it and you'll want to stay there and you'll get, and it's like, literally don't say that to me. I hope that never happens. That, like, don't put that on me. I don't want that. I don't want that. So it is like, not giving up might make you look a little crazy, but I can't stress it enough how much it just doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't. Who is gonna check you? Who's gonna check you? Who? And if like people are checking you, it's like, they're probably not at the best version of themselves, and it's also fear-based. It's also based in fear. And that is not going to get you anywhere. It's going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you police others. That's a big part of this, is people who are too afraid to fail police others. Just like my coworker was like, I would do that if I wasn't so, just because she's afraid. And because she's afraid, she wants other people to feel afraid. Like, I missed the memo that I too should be afraid. It's like, I'm not. Like, I have experienced so much debasement in my life that I just don't feel like I can be rattled super easily to that extreme. I got that dog in me. Shit.